WIBC Hotline, joined by Scott Walter. He is the author of the book, Arabella Advisors, and it is all about how dark money is influencing our society. So, Scott, let's start with this. What is dark money, and how is it influencing so much of what happens in America?
Well, the term was coined back in 2010 to refer to money from a particular type of nonprofit, the so-called 501c4s. Those are things like the National Rifle Association, the League of Conservation Voters, nonprofits that are that endorse candidates and otherwise get involved in politics,
right?
And they don't have to reveal their donors. Now, it was invented by somebody on the left side of the spectrum, and for years now they've acted as if only right wingers would be so wicked as to use this sort of thing. And but of course, what you discover if you investigate things, as my colleagues at the Capital Research Center have, is that the left has far more dark money, however you want to define it. Now, the definition over the years has sort of slipped so that it sort of means anything I don't like.
Yeah. Okay. So real quick, Scott, just to kind of reset for our audience. In politics, if you give to say it's a candidate for Congress, you give that money is disclosed, it's on a form, everybody can go see it. You give money to a political action committee, that money's on a form, everybody can go see it. There's different giving amounts based on what you're giving to, but those are disclosed. But what you're saying is these specific nonprofit groups, money's given to them. They then use that money for causes, et cetera, influencing public opinion, influencing in their own way elections, and you don't know who gave them the money.
Exactly.
All right. So people might say, hey, money is free speech. That's always the argument. Hey, money is free speech. I should be able to give as much as I want to whoever I want. What business is it of the government? Why does this dark money matter? Why should people care about it?
Well, as I said, the left for years acted as if this was some secret, evil, right-wing plot, when in fact there's more of it on the left than there is on the right. Now, it's complicated because the free speech argument is actually correct where nonprofits are concerned. I don't, there's the most famous case in this, in our history, is from the very racist days in Alabama, the NAACP versus Alabama, back in the 50s when you had people like Bull Connor. By the way, these were all Democrats, amusingly.
Right.
When they were trying to harass the NAACP and black people, they demanded, we want your member list and your donor list. And this was fought all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said you have a right to private association with your fellow citizens for causes like black civil rights.
Right.
And that's so. And I agree with that. But what I also think is important, there still is a way to track you can't track the original donors, but you can track what the groups are doing, and you can track how much total money the groups have. And that's what we do at Capital Research, and we find that the left is doing far more of this than the right. Yeah,
so Arabella Advisors is the book. We'll get to that here in just a second. So wouldn't one of the solutions to this, obviously this kind of all stemmed out of campaign finance. The Supreme Court ruled on that. It ruled, hey, the government can set limits on how much federal candidates can raise, which they do. But then outside of this, the political action committees, you cannot. Wouldn't a simple solution to this be, hey, it's your money. Give it to whoever you want. As long as everybody discloses it, we're all fine. And then to me, it's just ridiculous that everybody's kind of doing the same stuff, but there's different limits on what you can give to who and who has to disclose what.
Well, I would flip the other way around. It's the campaign finance laws that have driven most of this. It is hard. You're talking about the limits, and people need to understand the limits to what you can give to candidates and parties are relatively low, and that's crazy. Why shouldn't you expect? And that nobody's complaining about that being disclosed. So it's the limits on that stuff that's stupid. You make it hard for money to go into the actual political parties and candidates. So guess what? Money's like water. It finds a way. So that's what has been driving money out of the disclosed political side of things and into the undisclosed nonprofit side of things. I'd love to see much more money going to the candidates and the parties.
Great.
You can hold them accountable. That's the other thing. You can't hold nonprofits accountable, but you can hold political parties and candidates accountable.
Yeah, so this is a great example of how government intervention, solving a problem, air quotes, actually ends up making the problem worse, which in this case, it makes it harder to track money in politics.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We'd be much better off if the parties were stronger and the nonprofits were less important. And by the way, if you're a George Soros or a Zuckerberg or a Bill Gates or all Hans Wiese, all these bad billionaires, you don't like what I'm saying, because the political parties will not always do your will. Sometimes they'll pay attention to the American people because they're trying to get themselves elected. But if I'm a nonprofit that lives off the billionaires, I'll do whatever the billionaires want, period.
Yeah,
they want the parties to be weaker.
That's such a great point. Scott Walter is our guest. His book, Arabella Advisors, which we'll talk about here in just a second, talking about how dark money is kind of running our society, running our politics now. You made such a great point there, Scott, which is these nonprofits sometimes are even set up by these people, but at the very least, they're totally beholden to all these rich, sometimes even foreign donors, and they can operate in the shadows, and it enables some really bad actors to have a ton of power because they don't have to do it in the sunshine like they do if they give to the congressional candidates or the Senate candidates.
Exactly.
All right, so tell us about the book, Arabella Advisors. Why should everybody pick it up?
Well, Arabella is by far the biggest dark money operation, left or right, except it's quite left. And you may never have heard of it, and you think, oh, well, I don't need to know about that. Let me give two simple numbers. In the 2020 election cycle, so that's a 2-year cycle, their nonprofits alone, and they have a for-profit side as well as nonprofit, their nonprofits alone took in $2.4 billion.
Wow.
That is $1 billion more than the DNC and the RNC combined. And then you'd think, oh, well, in 22 cycle, that must have gone down. It's an off year, right? Wrong. Not $2.4 billion. This time, $3 billion, which is more than the DNC, RNC, both parties' Senate committees, both parties' House committees. You got to add another $500 million to get to that number.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
So they are very important. Yeah. They're also behind the news. You see, you see the stuff like the Supreme Court, Sonia Sotomayor's medical records getting out there to try to force her to resign. Blah blah. That's an Arabella spawned group. On and on and on. They are, you've never heard of them, and yet they're incredibly important for your politics.
All right, before we let you go, Scott, you're actually going to be, Scott Walter, author of the book Arabella Advisors, is actually going to be, you're going to be here in Boone County coming up next week, August the 21st, speaking with the Republican Women's Club out there. Tell us about that.
Very excited to talk to the ladies. They were kind enough to invite me. And Indiana, is far more important than Washington, D.C. That's, one of the evil things about Arabella and the billionaires is everything they do tries to take power away from people in Indiana and give it to people in D.C. and or to their paymasters. And it's great to be out in the heartland.
All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing you coming up next week. Scott Walter, author of the book Arabella Advisors, a fascinating conversation about how dark money is influencing our politics and our society, and appreciate you putting in the work to let us know a little bit about it. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, 93 WIBC, it's Kendall and Casey Show. 317-684-8444. That's the phone number if you'd like to be a part of the program. Casey will be back Monday, but for the last couple days, it's been me searching through the phone calls. Casey's way better at